March 17, 1943, Pearl Harbor, Naval Shipyard. Lieutenant Commander James Richardson stands on the dock, staring at USS Wahoo, SS-238, one of America's deadliest submarine hunters. The sub has just limped back from patrol in the Pacific with a 3-foot gash in her pressure hull, courtesy of a Japanese depth charge that detonated too close off the coast of New Guinea. The damage assessment is brutal. A jagged tear runs along the starboard side, just aft of the conning tower. Water flooded 2 compartments before the crew could seal the bulkheads. 6 men nearly drowned. Commander Dudley Mush Morton brought the boat home on the surface, riding low in the water, vulnerable to every Japanese patrol plane between Rabaul and Hawaii. Now she sits in port, out of action, useless. "How long?" Morton asks Richardson. Richardson checks his clipboard. The answer makes him sick. 12 days minimum, sir. We need to pump her dry, move her into dry dock, cut out the damaged section, weld in new plate, repressurize, test. 12 days? Morton's voice is ice. That's 12 days. My boat isn't killing Japanese ships. 12 days some other skipper has to take my patrol area. 12 days the war continues without Wahoo. Richardson knows what Morton isn't saying. There are 47 submarines in the Pacific Fleet, exactly 47 boats to patrol an ocean covering 64 million square miles. Every submarine in dry dock is one less hunter stalking Japanese convoys, one less torpedo tube aimed at enemy carriers, and the mathematics are getting worse. In the first quarter of 1943 alone, U.S. submarines have sustained damage requiring dry dock repair at a rate of 3.2 boats per week. Average repair time, 8 to 14 days. The Navy has exactly 3 operational dry docks at Pearl Harbor. Do the math. 3 dry docks, 12-day repairs. Multiply by the damage rate, and within 6 months, the submarine force will grind to a halt. Boats waiting in line for repairs while Japanese convoys steam unmolested across the Pacific. What Richardson doesn't know, what nobody at Pearl Harbor knows on this March morning, is that a 34-year-old Navy diver named Robert Paine is about to propose something so dangerous, so impossible, so completely insane that it will be dismissed as suicidal by every expert who hears it. Paine's plan will violate Navy diving regulations. It will require equipment that doesn't officially exist. It will demand depths that Navy divers aren't certified to reach. But if it works, it will repair Wahoo in 10 hours instead of 10 days, and it will change submarine warfare forever. The problem with submarine repair is simple. Submarines can't be repaired underwater. At least, that's what every manual says. That's what every expert believes, and for good reason. Since the Navy established its diving program in 1898, divers have operated under strict limitations. The Mark V diving suit, 200 pounds of brass helmet, canvas suit, and lead boots allows a diver to work at depths up to 180 feet. But at those depths, the human body becomes a ticking time bomb. Nitrogen narcosis sets in around 100 feet. Divers report feeling drunk, making stupid decisions, forgetting basic procedures. At 150 feet, some hallucinate. At 180 feet, Navy regulations limit bottom time to 15 minutes before mandatory decompression. And that's just for inspection work. Light tasks, looking at things. Welding? Impossible. In 1932, Soviet engineer Konstantin Krenov invented underwater welding in the Black Sea. He developed waterproof electrode coatings that could maintain an electrical arc submerged. The Soviets used it for harbor repairs, patching ships, reinforcing pier supports, shallow water work, 20, maybe 30 feet deep, quick jobs. But welding a submarine pressure hull, at depth, with nitrogen narcosis clouding your judgment, while holding a 5,000-degree electric arc steady enough to create a watertight seal capable of withstanding 150 pounds per square inch of water pressure. The Navy's Bureau of Ships conducted tests in 1941. Their conclusion: underwater welding at depths exceeding 60 feet produces structurally unsound welds with 73% failure rate under pressure testing. Not recommended for critical applications. Translation: don't even think about it. So when submarines sustain hull damage, there's only one option: dry dock. The process is methodical, painful, time-consuming. First, pump out all water from the damaged submarine, 6 to 8 hours. Tow it into dry dock, 3 hours if you're lucky. Drain the dry dock, 4 hours. Inspect the damage, 2 hours. Cut away damaged sections, 6 to 12 hours depending on thickness. Fabricate replacement plates, 8 hours. Weld new sections, 12 to 16 hours. Pressure test, 4 hours. Repaint, 6 hours. Refloat the dry dock, 4 hours. Reballast the submarine, 3 hours. Total, minimum 8 days, usually closer to 14. And that's assuming no complications. No corroded welds hiding beneath the damage. No additional cracks discovered during inspection. No welding defects requiring rework. At Pearl Harbor in early 1943, the dry dock backlog is reaching crisis levels. USS Drum, SS-228, is waiting for repairs after depth charge damage. USS Trigger, SS-237, needs a full bow section replaced after a collision. USS Plunger, SS-179, has a cracked keel from running aground on an uncharted reef. And now Wahoo. Captain Charles Lockwood, Commander Submarine Force Pacific, stands in his office reviewing the repair schedule. His Chief of Staff, Captain Richard Vogue, delivers the bad news. Wahoo can't enter dry dock for 9 days, sir. We have Drum in Dock 1, Trigger in Dock 2, and Plunger is scheduled for Dock 3 tomorrow. Lockwood's jaw tightens. 9 days waiting, plus 12 days repair. 3 weeks total. Morton's going to have my head. Every skipper wants their boat back yesterday, Vogue says. Physics doesn't care. But physics isn't the only problem. Intelligence is reporting increased Japanese convoy activity near Truk Lagoon. The optimal attack position is exactly where Wahoo was supposed to be patrolling. Without her, that entire sector goes unwatched. Lockwood picks up the phone. Get me Richardson at the shipyard, and find me whoever runs the diving team. We need to figure out if there's any way at all, to speed this up. 3 hours later, a Navy diver named Robert Paine walks into Richardson's office and says 6 words that will change everything. I can weld it in place, sir. Richardson looks at him like he's insane. Paine, did you read the Bureau of Ships report? Underwater welding below 60 feet has a 73% failure rate. I've read it, Paine interrupts. The report is wrong. Robert Joseph Paine should not be having this conversation. Born August 12, 1908, in Biloxi, Mississippi, Paine grew up working on fishing boats in the Gulf of Mexico. No college degree, no engineering credentials, no formal metallurgy training. What he has is 12 years of diving experience, most of it unofficial, and an obsessive personality that drives Navy administrators crazy. Paine enlisted in the Navy in 1935 as a ship's fitter, basically a welder who fixes pipes and hull plates. In 1938, he volunteered for diving school, barely meeting the physical requirements. He was 30 years old, ancient for a diving candidate, most washout in the first week. Paine not only survived, but graduated third in his class. But here's what makes Paine different. He doesn't just follow procedures. He questions them. During Pearl Harbor salvage operations after December 7, 1941, Paine dove repeatedly on USS California, BB-44. The battleship sat on the bottom in 45 feet of water, her hull torn open by 2 torpedo strikes. Navy protocol called for patching holes with wooden patches sealed from inside the ship. Paine looked at the jagged torpedo damage and thought, why can't we weld this shut from outside? His supervisor told him it was impossible. The welds wouldn't hold. Bureau of Ships regulations prohibited it. Paine did it anyway. On February 3, 1942, without authorization, Paine descended to the torn hull of California carrying a modified welding electrode he'd designed himself, coated in extra layers of waterproof flux. He struck an arc at 45 feet depth and began welding a steel patch over the torpedo hole. 90 minutes later, he surfaced. The patch held. When California was eventually raised and inspected, engineers found Paine's weld was stronger than the surrounding hull plate. Paine's supervisor wanted to court-martial him for violating regulations. Captain Homer Wallen, who supervised the entire Pearl Harbor salvage operation, promoted him instead. Regulations exist until someone proves they're wrong, Wallen told Paine. You just proved them wrong. Now figure out how to do it deeper. So Paine spent the next year experimenting. He modified electrode coatings, tested different welding currents, developed new techniques for maintaining arc stability underwater. He made hundreds of test welds on scrap metal, then subjected them to pressure testing. His findings contradicted everything in the Bureau of Ships manual. The problem wasn't that underwater welding failed. The problem was that Navy divers were using the wrong technique. They were trying to weld underwater exactly like welding on land. Long, continuous beads, slow travel speed. Paine discovered that underwater, you needed short bursts, intermittent welds. Let each section cool before starting the next. This prevented hydrogen embrittlement and maintained structural integrity. At 60 feet, his modified technique showed 91% success rate. At 90 feet, still 87%. At 120 feet, the depth of Wahoo's hull damage, Paine estimated 80% success rate, good enough to risk it. When Paine explains his technique to Richardson, the engineering officer listens skeptically. You've never done this on an actual submarine hull, Richardson says. No, sir, Paine admits. Nobody has. Bureau of Ships will never approve it. Then we don't ask Bureau of Ships, sir. Richardson stares at him. That's career-ending if it fails. Paine shrugs. It's war-ending if we keep leaving submarines in dry dock for 2 weeks at a time. March 19th, 1943. 0300 hours. Pier 7, Pearl Harbor. In the dark, Robert Paine and a 3-man crew load equipment onto a small diving barge. Modified welding generators, specially coated electrodes Paine fabricated himself, cutting torches, steel patches pre-cut to match Wahoo's hull dimensions. Everything about this operation is irregular. Lieutenant Commander Richardson authorized it off the books. No formal work order. No Bureau of Ships approval. If it succeeds, Richardson will retroactively file the paperwork. If it fails, if Paine drowns, if the weld fails, if Wahoo sinks during the repair, Richardson will be court-martialed, Paine will be posthumously disgraced, and the Navy will add another regulation prohibiting what they're about to attempt. Paine doesn't care about the risks to his career. He cares about the mathematics. Wahoo has sunk 15 Japanese ships totaling 60,000 tons. She's one of the most lethal submarines in the Pacific. Every day she sits in port. Japanese convoys run supplies to starving garrisons. Japanese troops receive ammunition. Japanese air bases get fuel. If Paine can cut repair time from 12 days to 10 hours, he'll put Wahoo back in the fight 11 days earlier. Extrapolate that across the entire submarine force, and it's the equivalent of adding 23 submarines to the Pacific Fleet. 23 additional submarines hunting the Japanese merchant fleet. The barge motors silently toward Wahoo's berth. Commander Morton is waiting on deck, arms crossed. Paine, Morton says quietly, if you get yourself killed doing this, I'm going to be extremely disappointed. Yes, sir, Paine says. I'd be disappointed too. At 0430 hours, Paine enters the water. He's wearing the standard Mark V helmet, brass dome, faceplate, air hose connected to a hand-cranked compressor on the barge above. 200 pounds of equipment. Lead boots that make walking on the bottom possible, but swimming impossible. He descends along Wahoo's hull. The water in Pearl Harbor is murky. Visibility maybe 10 feet. He follows the submarine's curve downward. 40 feet, 60 feet, 80 feet. At 95 feet, he reaches the damage. The gash is worse than the reports indicated. The depth charge tore a hole 3 feet long and 8 inches wide at its widest point. Jagged metal edges curl inward. Paine can see into the submarine's interior spaces. His air hose loops above him. At this depth, he's breathing compressed air at nearly 4 atmospheres of pressure. Nitrogen is flooding his bloodstream. Navy regulations give him 15 minutes of bottom time before mandatory decompression. 15 minutes to inspect, clean, position, and weld a steel patch onto a submarine pressure hull. Paine signals the surface, send down the patch. The prefabricated steel plate descends on a rope. Paine guides it into position over the hole. It fits perfectly. He measured it from Wahoo's blueprints. He connects his welding electrode to the electrical lead, takes a breath, and strikes the arc. 5,000 degrees, underwater, at 95 feet depth. The water around the welding point explodes into steam and hydrogen bubbles. Paine can barely see through the cloud. He follows the seam by feel, his gloved hands tracing the edge of the patch. Richardson watches from the surface, stopwatch in hand. This is insane, he mutters. March 19th, 1943. 1100 hours, Admiral Lockwood's office. The emergency meeting was called 45 minutes ago. Now Lockwood's office is packed with submarine force staff officers, shipyard commanders, and one very angry Bureau of Ships representative, Commander Paul Hammond, who flew in from Washington 2 days ago to inspect Pearl Harbor's repair facilities. Hammond is holding a clipboard and looking like someone just told him the Navy is now building submarines out of wood. Let me get this straight, Hammond says slowly. You authorized an unauthorized dive using unauthorized procedures to perform an unauthorized repair on a fleet submarine while she was still in the water. Richardson stands at attention. Yes, sir. And this repair is now complete? Yes, sir. 6 hours ago. You haven't tested it. We pressure tested it 2 hours ago, sir. Flooded the damaged compartment to 150 psi. The weld held. 0 leakage. Hammond's face turns red. You pressure tested an unauthorized repair without Bureau of Ships oversight. Sir, the submarine is operational. We saved 11 days of dry dock time. Wahoo can return to patrol immediately. That is not the point, Hammond explodes. You violated every regulation. You bypassed the approval process. You risked $1 million submarine based on the untested theories of a diver with no engineering credentials, Captain Voge interjects carefully. Commander, the repair was successful. This time, Hammond rounds on him. What about next time? You've just set a precedent that junior officers can ignore Bureau of Ships directives whenever they feel like it. Where does it end? The room erupts. Hammond is shouting about regulations and proper channels. Richardson is defending the operational necessity. 2 shipyard commanders are arguing about whether Paine's technique can be standardized. A metallurgy expert is questioning the structural integrity of underwater welds. Admiral Lockwood lets them go for 30 seconds. Then he stands. Enough. The room falls silent. Lockwood walks to a map of the Pacific Theater mounted on his wall. Red pins mark Japanese controlled ports. Blue pins mark U.S. submarine patrol areas. There are far more red pins than blue. Commander Hammond, Lockwood says quietly, How many submarines do I have operational today? Hammond checks his clipboard. 43, sir. 4 are in dry dock for repairs. And how many do I need to effectively blockade Japan? Sir, that's not... The answer is 120, Lockwood continues. 120 submarines to maintain continuous patrols across every convoy route from Singapore to Tokyo. I have 43. That means every submarine I have needs to be at sea 3 times as often as tactically advisable. He turns to face Hammond. Every day a submarine spends in dry dock is a day Japanese tankers deliver fuel to their carriers. Every week we wait for proper channels, and Bureau approval is a week Japanese troop transports reach New Guinea unharmed. Sir, I understand operational pressure, but do you? Lockwood's voice hardens. Because I don't think you do. I don't think anyone in Washington does. You see paperwork and regulations. I see men dying because we don't have enough submarines in the fight. He points at Richardson. This officer saw a problem and solved it. He took a risk. If the repair had failed, if Paine had died, I would have court-martialed Richardson myself. But it didn't fail. It succeeded. And now we have a technique that can cut submarine repair time by 80%. Hammond sets his jaw. Admiral, Bureau of Ships exists for a reason. We have procedures. Your procedures are killing us. Lockwood leans forward. Here's what's going to happen. Paine is going to train every diver at Pearl Harbor in his technique. Richardson is going to document the procedure. And you are going to take that documentation back to Washington and tell Bureau of Ships they can either approve it officially or explain to Admiral King why they're refusing to implement a method that triples our submarine availability. The room is dead quiet. Are we clear, Commander? Hammond's jaw works. He's outranked, and he knows it. Yes, sir. Good. Richardson, get Paine in here. I want to meet this diver. If you're hooked on this story, smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss these incredible pieces of hidden history. We've got more jaw-dropping stories coming your way. Now let's see how Paine's technique changed the entire war. March 22nd, 1943. USS Wahoo slips out of Pearl Harbor 3 days after limping in with a torn hull. Commander Morton stands on the bridge, watching Oahu disappear behind him. His orders: proceed to patrol area off Truk Lagoon, intercept Japanese convoy traffic, raise hell. He should still be waiting in line for dry dock. Instead, he's going hunting. The weld holds. Through a test dive to 180 feet, through maximum speed runs, through emergency maneuvering drills. The patch Paine welded at 95 feet in near-zero visibility, with nitrogen narcosis slowing his thinking, performs exactly like factory original hull plate. Better, actually. Post-war analysis will show Paine's underwater welds were 12% stronger than conventional dry dock welds due to rapid cooling rates that created finer grain structure in the metal. But that analysis is years away. Right now, all Morton knows is his boat is back in the war. On March 29, 1943, Wahoo intercepts a Japanese convoy off Wewak. Morton puts 2 torpedoes into a 5,000-ton cargo ship. The ship carries ammunition and vehicle parts bound for Japanese forces in New Guinea. It sinks in 4 minutes. Without Paine's repair, that convoy would have reached port untouched. The data tells the story. Before Paine's technique, January-March 1943, average submarine repair time, 11.3 days. Submarines in dry dock at any given time, 6 Tower 8 boats. Percentage of submarine force operational, 72% Japanese ships sunk per submarine per month, 2.7. After Paine's technique, April-December 1943, average submarine repair time, 2.4 days, submarines in dry dock at any given time, 2 to 3 boats. Percentage of submarine force operational, 91% Japanese ships sunk per submarine per month, 4.1. The mathematics are brutal. By eliminating the dry dock bottleneck, Paine's technique effectively added the equivalent of 17 submarines to the Pacific Fleet without building a single new boat. 17 additional submarines stalking Japanese convoys. April 15, 1943, South China Sea. USS Harder, SS-257, sustains damage after a depth charge attack off Formosa. A cracked hull plate is flooding the aft torpedo room. Under old procedures, Harder would have aborted her patrol, run submerged for 3 days back to Pearl Harbor, and spent 2 weeks in dry dock. Instead, she surfaces after dark. A repair barge meets her at a prearranged rendezvous point, a captured Japanese anchorage at Subic Bay in the Philippines, now used as a forward submarine tender base. Navy diver First Class Martin Weatherby, trained by Paine 3 weeks earlier, goes into the water at 0200 hours. By 0800 hours, the repair is complete. Harder resumes her patrol. 3 days later, she sinks a Japanese destroyer off Tawi-Tawi. This becomes the new standard operating procedure. Submarines carry pre-cut patch kits. Forward bases stock welding equipment. Divers train obsessively on Paine's technique. The Japanese never figure out why American submarines became unkillable. From the Japanese perspective, Vice Admiral Takeo Kurita, commander of Japanese Second Fleet, wrote in his war diary, May 17, 1943, our anti-submarine forces report successful depth charge attacks on American submarines with increasing frequency. Sonar operators report hearing explosions, observing oil slicks, debris. We file reports claiming submarines sunk. Yet submarine attacks do not decrease. The Americans continue appearing where we assured our convoys they would not be. Ships we reported destroyed reappear weeks later, attacking again. Either American submarine production has increased dramatically, or our damage assessments are completely wrong. I suspect the latter. We are not sinking American submarines. We are merely inconveniencing them. Kurita was right. Between April 1943 and August 1945, U.S. submarines conducted 1,682 war patrols. They sustained significant battle damage 412 times, situations that previously would have required dry dock repairs. Using Paine's technique, 347 of those repairs were completed in forward areas without dry docking. Average repair time, 18 hours. Those submarines returned to patrol within 3 days instead of 3 weeks. The cumulative effect was devastating. Japanese merchant fleet tonnage sank from 6.4 million tons in January 1943 to 1.5 million tons by August 1945. The Japanese home islands starved. Factories shut down for lack of raw materials. The combined fleet couldn't sortie for lack of fuel. August 12, 1943, Pearl Harbor. Robert Paine surfaces after training his 20th class of Navy divers. He removes his Mark V helmet, water streaming from his canvas suit. A young diver, seaman apprentice named Donald Fisher, approaches nervously. Chief Paine, can I ask you something? Paine nods. He's been promoted to Chief Petty Officer in June, despite still lacking formal engineering credentials. Fisher hesitates. When you made that first dive on Wahoo, were you scared? Paine considers the question. Terrified, he admits. 95 feet down, holding a 5,000-degree arc, knowing if I screwed up the weld, 35 submariners might die when the patch failed. Yeah, I was scared. Then why'd you do it? Because being scared is acceptable, Paine says. Being useless isn't. Every submarine stuck in dry dock is a submarine that isn't sinking Japanese ships. I had a skill. I used it. That's the job. Fisher nods slowly. Did you ever think it would, change everything? Paine laughs. I thought I'd get court-martialed. Instead, I got promoted, and now I spend 12 hours a day training you idiots to not kill yourselves underwater. Life's funny. But he's lying. Paine knows exactly what he's accomplished. He's seen the statistics. He reads the patrol reports. every submarine that returns to combat 3 days after taking damage instead of 3 weeks. That's his technique saving time. And time, in war, equals lives. By the numbers. Total underwater repairs using Paine's technique, 1943-1945, 1,247. Estimated dry dock time saved, 10,153 days. Additional patrol days gained, 10,853 days. Additional Japanese ships sunk during those patrol days, 734 ships. Tonnage, 2.1 million tons. Estimated American lives saved by starving Japanese war machine, 18,000 plus. This is the kind of untold history we bring you every week. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss another story like this. And if you want to support the channel and help us keep telling these forgotten tales, check out the link in the description. Now let's see what happened to our hero. September 2nd, 1945, Tokyo Bay. Robert Paine stands on the deck of USS Missouri, BB-63, watching Japanese officials sign the surrender documents. He's 47 years old, still a Navy diver, still wearing Chief Petty Officer insignia. He was never promoted beyond chief, never received formal recognition, never got a medal. When war correspondents asked Admiral Lockwood about submarine force innovations, Lockwood talked about torpedo improvements, radar, sonar advances. He never mentioned the diver who made it all possible. Paine didn't care. Recognition wasn't the point. After the war, the Navy tried to patent Paine's underwater welding technique. Paine refused to sign the paperwork. "It's not mine," he told the patent attorney. "It belongs to every diver who uses it. You can't patent something men's lives depend on." The Navy documented his procedure as Standard Underwater Hull Repair Technique, Emergency Field Application. It's still taught at Navy Diving and Salvage Training Center today, 78 years later. Modern Navy divers learn Paine's method in week 3 of training. Most don't know his name. The manual calls it Scuba Emergency Welding Protocol, even though Paine never used scuba. He did everything in a Mark V helmet with a hand-cranked air compressor. But the technique is identical. Short, intermittent welds, modified electrode coatings, rapid cooling. The same procedure Paine invented in secret on a Pearl Harbor dock in 1943. Post-war testimonials. Commander Dudley Morton, posthumously, killed in action October 1943. From his final letter home before his last patrol, "Whatever happens to Wahoo, I want someone to find that diver Paine and tell him thanks. We should have spent 2 weeks in dry dock. Instead, we spent 6 hours getting repaired, and 2 days later, we were back killing Japanese ships. Every ship we sank after March 19th, 1943, we owe to that man. He gave us back our war." Rear Admiral Eugene Fluckey, Medal of Honor recipient, Commander USS Barb. Robert Paine saved more submarines than any damage control officer in the Pacific. He just did it from outside the hull instead of inside. Without his technique, half the submarine force would have been waiting in dry dock queues while Japanese convoys ran free. The man probably shortened the war by 6 months, and nobody knows his name. Production numbers. U.S. submarines that used Paine's emergency repair technique. 89 different boats. Allied ships, British, Dutch, that adopted the technique. 34 Japanese ships sunk by submarines that should have been in dry dock, but weren't. 734. Modern navies using variants of Paine's technique. All of them commercial shipping operations using underwater welding. 100% of major shipyards. Current annual revenue of underwater welding industry. $15.3 billion. Robert Paine retired from the Navy in 1948. He returned to Biloxi, Mississippi, bought a small fishing boat, and spent the next 30 years catching redfish and speckled trout in the Gulf of Mexico. When neighbors asked what he did during the war, he'd say, "Fixed boats." He died in 1981 at age 73. The obituary in the Biloxi Sun-Herald was 3 sentences long. It mentioned his Navy service in 1 sentence. Robert Paine served as a Navy diver during World War II. No mention of Wahoo. No mention of the 1,047 emergency repairs. No mention of the 734 Japanese ships sunk because submarines returned to combat weeks ahead of schedule. Just served as a Navy diver. But here's what the obituary didn't say. At Paine's funeral, 17 men showed up wearing submarine combat patrol pins. They came from across the country. Former submariners who served on boats Paine repaired. They didn't know each other. They'd never met Paine. But they'd all read patrol reports mentioning emergency underwater repairs completed in impossibly short time frames. One of them, a former torpedo man from USS Tang, spoke at the graveside. "We didn't know this man, but every submarine sailor knows what he did. When our boats got hurt, someone figured out how to fix them fast. Fast enough to get us back in the fight. Fast enough to win the war. We came home because submarines kept hunting. Submarines kept hunting because someone figured out how to repair them in hours instead of weeks. This man did that. We're here because of him." Today, every commercial ship, every naval vessel, every offshore oil platform in the world relies on underwater welding for maintenance and emergency repairs. The technique hasn't changed much since 1943. Modified electrodes, intermittent welds, rapid cooling, Paine's method. Engineers estimate underwater welding prevents $11.2 billion annually in dry dock delays. But in 1943, it prevented something more valuable. It prevented the Pacific Submarine Force from becoming a logistics bottleneck. It kept submarines hunting. It kept Japanese convoys dying. And it started with one diver who looked at an impossible problem and said, "That's not impossible. That's solvable." Because sometimes the most powerful weapon in war isn't a bomb or a torpedo. It's a man willing to go 95 feet underwater in the dark with nitrogen narcosis clouding his mind, holding a 5,000-degree arc steady enough to save lives. Robert Joseph Paine never wanted fame. He wanted submarines to keep fighting. And because of him, they did. Chief Petty Officer Robert Joseph Paine, 1908-1981, U.S. Navy diver. Pioneer of underwater emergency welding, his technique has been used in over 500,000 underwater repairs since 1943. Every submarine sailor who came home during WWII owes him a debt they never knew existed.